The world to come, 2030, a world spinning toward the Messiah. By the year 2030, the world had become unrecognizable, not because of some catastrophic war, not because of a sudden collapse of civilization, but because of something far more subtle. AI had not taken over with force, it had taken over with convenience. People no longer needed to think deeply. The machines thought for them. It started simply. AI handled traffic systems, hospital records, financial markets. Then it began writing books, shaping news, filtering truth. By 2030, most of the world's decisions were quietly optimized by artificial intelligence. But there was still a glitch in the system. The Jews. They were always a problem, always refusing to go along, always questioning. History had tried to erase them through violence. Now, it tried to erase them through irrelevance. And the spark that set everything in motion, the war that never really ended. The war that shook the world. It had been years since October 7th, 2023, but the world still had not moved on. The scars were fresh. Hamas had slaughtered 1,200 Jews. Not soldiers, not fighters, but mothers, fathers, babies in their cribs. Israel had responded with fire, and the world had turned against them. At first, the global support for Israel was overwhelming. Even those who had never defended the Jewish state suddenly understood. The barbarity was too obvious, too clear. But clarity never lasts. The war dragged on. Gaza burned. The suffering of the Palestinians, though caused by Hamas itself, became the world's new obsession. Al Jazeera, CNN, and media outlets across the globe focused only on the destruction, never on Hamas hiding behind civilians. Never on the Israeli families still mourning. Never on the Jews still being hunted in their own land. And slowly, the world shifted. Those who once defended Israel began to question, how long will this war go on? Maybe both sides are guilty. Maybe the Jews are more powerful than they admit. Even those who had once stood firmly with Israel now spoke in a different tone. I support Israel, but the but was growing. And then came the whispers. The Jews control the media. The Jews are supremacists. Maybe they really are the villains of history after all. It wasn't blatant at first. It never is. But gradually, the world that once promised never again was beginning to reconsider. The internal Jewish divide. Within the Jewish world, something even greater was happening. For the first time in decades, secular Jews were waking up. Many of them had spent their lives fighting for leftist causes, believing in human rights, believing that anti-Semitism was a thing of the past. October 7th had shattered their illusions. They saw how quickly their so-called allies abandoned them. They saw that in the eyes of the world, a Jewish life was worth less than any other. And so, for the first time in their lives, they turned to the Torah. They weren't religious, not yet, but they knew something was happening. Something bigger than politics, bigger than war. They saw it in their bones. They saw that the world was pushing them toward Hashem. But how? How was a Jew supposed to return? Here is where the great battle of the era began. Rabbi Yaron Reuven versus Rabbi Manis Friedman. The two paths. In a world growing more chaotic by the day, two rabbis stood at the forefront of Jewish thought. Rabbi Yaron Reuven saw the warning signs. He had been speaking about it for years. He knew what was coming, and he was terrified. Hashem is punishing us. He roared from the bima. The war was just the beginning. The rise in anti-Semitism is just the beginning. The world hates us because we have failed in our mission. If we do not wake up now, Hashem will send something far worse. He pointed to the secular Jews returning to the Torah and warned them not to be lazy in their teshuvah. You think you can just say, I believe, and that's enough. Hashem demands action. If you do not keep Shabbat, if you do not stop the sins that brought us to this point, you will be judged. His words were fire. Some feared him, some hated him, but many were shaken to their core. Across the Jewish world, another voice spoke just as powerfully, but in a completely different tone. Rabbi Manis Friedman saw the awakening, but he saw it differently. The Jewish people are like children, he said calmly. You don't beat a child into obedience, you show them love. He saw the secular Jews returning and did not condemn them for their slow progress. The fact that they are returning at all is a miracle. They have been raised in darkness. They know nothing. And you expect them to suddenly become righteous overnight? To Rabbi Friedman, punishment did not exist in this generation. The Jewish people had suffered enough. They are waking up because they are beginning to feel Hashem's love, not His wrath. And we must guide them with love, or they will run once again. And so, the great divide between these two voices grew. Rabbi Reuven condemned Rabbi Friedman, saying he was allowing Jews to stay comfortable in their sins. Rabbi Friedman dismissed Rabbi Reuven, saying that fear would only push people away. And as they fought, the world outside grew darker. AI tightens its grip at the same time. Artificial intelligence continued its quiet takeover. It did not ban Torah. It did not outlaw Judaism. It simply filtered it. Jewish ideas were still available, but the concept of chosen people was now considered ethically problematic. The idea that Hashem punishes was labeled extremist theology. Videos discussing the war were automatically limited due to sensitive content. Nobody stopped you from studying Torah. But slowly, without realizing it, you were only seeing one version of it. And the world continued its march toward the unknown, the acceleration toward the Messiah. The world was heading somewhere, fast. It was not chaos for the sake of chaos. It was chaos with direction. Every event, every crisis was pushing the Jews toward teshuvah. The secular world hated them because deep down, the nations of the world knew the Jews were leading history towards something they could not control. The Jews fought among themselves because deep down, they knew they were standing at the precipice of something massive, and the AI. The AI was only the beginning of something far greater, a world without uncertainty, a world without free will, a world without the need for Hashem. And that is why Hashem was shaking the world apart, because it was now or never. The final exile was ending. The Jewish people had a choice. Would they return, or would they let the world erase them? The builders of the world to come had one last mission, and the clock was ticking.